Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about the sport of the caber toss. This is my presentation. My name's Camden Miller, and I appreciate y'all joining me. So first off, we're going to talk about where it originated. So it originated in 1574, and there's a couple different ways that people say that it was originated. However, we're just going to focus on the two main ones. The most prominent one is that the Scottish woodsmen began to throw cabers for just a leisure activity, so they would just basically compete against each other to see who could throw the straightest log, whether it was over a stream or just in a field, anything like that. And then other sources say that during the military campaigns, they actually threw the cabers over streams to provide bridges for the soldiers. However, the sport gets its name from the Gaelic word cabar or caber, which just translates to wooden beam. So the overall concept of the sport is that there's going to be a caber, which is obviously a beam of wood. It's usually a Scottish pine. It's about 17.5 feet, but it can vary a little bit. Usually weighs about 175 pounds, and the goal is to throw it as accurately and as straight as you can. So it's not judged on the distance that it goes or how far or wide you can throw it, anything like that. It's specifically based on how straight your angle is based on the thrower. So the caber is going to have two ends, obviously. It's going to have a red end and a blue end. So the red end is going to be on the top once the athlete picks it up. It's a little wider in its circumference, so obviously it's a little heavier. And then the blue end is going to be the smaller and the lighter end. So when the athlete picks it up, they're going to pick it up on the blue side. They're going to take a couple steps and they're going to throw it up in the air with their hips and their arms. Basically, the red end should flip and hit the ground first, and the blue end should follow, falling opposite of the thrower so that it doesn't fall on the athlete. Not a lot of rules in this game. However, there can only be a couple people that actually can lift the caber, because if everyone can lift the caber, then it's not heavy enough. And if no one can lift the caber, then it's a little too heavy, and then they'll just saw off a little bit, which is why the weight and the length can vary just a little bit. And obviously the thrower with the highest score is going to win the game. So here's a quick little 1-minute how-to video. So you can see that side that the athlete's picking up is a little smaller. It kind of looks like a giant baseball bat with the wider end on the top when he first picks it up. And then once he throws it, that wider end on the top, that's the red end, that is going to hit the ground first and it's going to fall forward. Another thing right here is it says start running as fast as you can, choose a point. Again, since it's not measured by distance, it doesn't matter where you throw it from. There's no starting line or boundary or anything like that. But most athletes usually take about 3 to 4 running steps before they throw it. So here's a little bit of orientation if that was confusing. So if you look at the top left, you're going to see judge, athlete, landing point. The judge is going to stand behind the athlete. Normally there's a couple circling them in like a little semicircle, just so they all can agree on the landing point. And then the athlete's going to throw the caber and it's going to land and hopefully make a straight line right here. So if you think of the athlete as being at 6 o'clock on a clock, obviously you want the caber to land at the 12 o'clock so that it makes the most straight line. However, if you look down here in the bottom right-hand corner, all of these little sticks sticking out, those are just kind of not options, but different ways that the caber can land. Obviously not in a straight line, so they don't get as many points, but the closer to the 12 o'clock that you get, the more points that the athlete is going to get. So governing bodies for the sport, both national and international governing for the sport is the caber toss is the RSHGA, that's the Royal Scottish Highland Games Association. So they control the traditional Highland Games within Scotland. They also have representatives for many, many games, both within and internationally. And they have different associates in many different countries, but there's a couple main ones that we'll talk about here in a second. So the popularity, obviously it's going to have the highest popularity in the Highlands of Scotland because that's its place of origin. The Highland Games are Scotland's culture, just like Americans love the Olympics to have this intense pride and nationalism and just want to showcase their talents and their strength and how they're the best of the best. That is basically the Highland Games for Scotland. So they'll have a bunch of different Scottish games, most notably the caber toss. But again, popularity is found almost worldwide, especially because the University of Arkansas was such a supporter of the caber toss that they started their own league here so that we could have athletes participate. With that, the world participation rates, it's not much note nowadays. However, there is some caber tossing in Australia and Canada and New Zealand and even the United States. However, it is admired all around the world due to the control and the strength and the dedication it takes in your life. So you have to obviously diet the right way. You have to work out the right way, because if you're running with almost 200 pounds in your hand, like the world record holder did, he flipped it, I believe, 145 times in an hour. You have to have a certain lifestyle. So with that, the participants that are athletes in caber toss, most of them are going to be Scottish just because it's their culture, it's their heritage, that's the way they were raised. However, many, many athletes participate in the caber toss to prove their strength and endurance and basically show off their big muscles. But again, participants can come from Scotland, Canada, the US, New Zealand, but again, anyone is welcome to participate if they so choose. So some of the events nationally, they have the Scottish Highland Games, the festivals for the Scottish and Celtic culture, the Crystal Coast Highland Games, and most notably the Braemar Gathering. That's going to happen annually, and that is the games where the royal family of Scotland is going to be present and look and watch all the sports and the athletes. But mostly the caber toss, because it is such a big deal over there and has so much influence around everyone. Internationally, the events can be held, obviously you can see that there's over 200 Highland Games that can be held in those countries that we just talked about, mostly hosted by associates of the International Highland Games Federation. Again, not much participation outside of Scotland, but enough that there could be some Highland Games somewhere else. Media coverage, again, another thing that's not very big, especially over here in the US, because we don't have that many athletes that participate in the caber toss. However, if there is a world record broken or any kind of news for the sport, there's going to be coverage pretty much everywhere, but mostly in Scotland. But again, they don't get that much media coverage. Sponsorships is not, again, a big deal for them because it's mostly donors or sponsors of the Highland Games in general. So they don't have specific enterprises or companies or anything like that that's going to sponsor the caber toss. They're just going to sponsor the Highland Games. Now, in here you'll see that a Scottish American oil and energy company did sponsor the caber toss at the San Diego Highland Games. However, that is the only big sponsorship of note, because most contributions will come from either historical societies for the festivals or just citizens that like the Highland Games. Now, lastly here, this is the caber toss, kind of broken down, how to, what you need, everything like that. So over here in the bottom right, you'll see the scorecard. So like I said, the red end and the blue end, you'll be able to see the scoring, and that's going to be basically decided by the judges, what the scoring's going to be, how wide the scoring's going to be, everything like that. However, what to do, you just flip it over, how to do it. Obviously, you're going to pick it up, run with it, and throw it. And then scoring, and the only thing you need is yourself, some muscles, the caber, and a scorecard. And now, to finish this off, there are no licensed products associated with the caber toss, just because, again, it's not that big a deal outside of historical societies or the Highland Games, so they don't have any brand licensing, any advertising, anything like that. They're just not associated with anything. These are my resources. I really appreciate y'all hanging out and learning about the caber toss. Feel free to email me or reply to my discussion if you guys have any other questions. I really appreciate it.